The stars were silent as the human ship Endeavour glided through the blackness of space. Captain Arlen Voss stood at the observation deck, watching distant suns flicker like tiny candles. This region of the galaxy was unexplored, a place where no human had gone before, and yet it held a mystery that called to them. The readings had come weeks ago, strange energy pulses from a planet known as Tharkon, a world rumored to be the home of the deadliest creatures humans had ever heard about. Scientists called it a Deathworld, a place where life struggled to survive in impossible conditions. And yet there were signs that intelligence had grown there, signs that someone, or something, had learned to live in a place designed to kill. Arlen turned to his crew. There were 7 people on this mission, each trained in survival, science, and diplomacy. "Prepare for descent," he said, his voice steady. "We don't know what's down there, but we will observe, learn, and respect it." The crew nodded, each one feeling the mixture of fear and excitement that always came with first contact. The Endeavour's shuttle cut through the thick atmosphere of Tharkon, the sky swirling with orange clouds and flashes of distant lightning. The surface below was jagged, full of towering mountains and deep valleys, and rivers of molten rock that glowed bright against the dark landscape. The shuttle landed on a flat plateau, and the ramp opened with a soft hiss. The humans stepped out, feeling the gravity immediately. It was heavier than Earth, pulling at their limbs and making every movement a small struggle. Arlen looked around. The air was thick and hot, carrying a metallic smell that stung the nose. Strange plants with thick, spiky leaves reached toward the sky, moving slightly as if aware of the humans. The ground beneath them trembled occasionally, and every so often distant roars echoed through the valleys. It was clear why this world was called a death world, but humans were not easily intimidated. The team activated their scanners, sweeping the area for life. Signals bounced back almost immediately. The readings were enormous, creatures far larger than humans, strong enough to crush a tree with a single hand, and yet intelligent, able to leave complex patterns in stone and rock. The species, which the humans would later name Drakthal, watched silently from the edges of the plateau. Their bodies were huge, covered in a natural armor that shone in the dim light, and their eyes, sharp and intelligent, followed every movement. The humans advanced slowly, careful not to appear threatening. Arlen raised a hand, showing a gesture of peace, and the crew mirrored him. For hours, neither side moved. The Drakthal were curious but wary, their instincts telling them that these strange, fragile creatures might be dangerous. The humans, in turn, studied their behavior, noting how they communicated with subtle gestures and vibrations that the human scanners could barely pick up. Night fell, though night on Tharkon was different from Earth. The sky was streaked with colors from the gases in the atmosphere, glowing in hues of purple and green. Small, luminous plants lit the ground like lanterns, and the humans set up camp. They did not make fires, knowing that any sudden light could frighten the locals. Instead, they used soft lamps and began to study the Drakthal from a safe distance. The first signs of interaction came unexpectedly. A young Drakthal, smaller than the others, approached cautiously. Its body was strong, but its eyes betrayed curiosity more than aggression. Arlen knelt, extending a hand slowly, offering a small sample of food. The creature sniffed, then, after a tense moment, took it. It was a small breakthrough, a fragile bridge of trust in a world built for survival through strength alone. Over the next several days, the humans learned more about Tharkon and its inhabitants. The planet tested them at every turn. Rivers of molten rock blocked paths, plants snapped shut if touched, and the wind carried sharp, cutting particles that could tear flesh. But humans adapted. They built simple bridges, wore protective suits, and used clever tools to navigate the dangerous terrain. Every problem they solved amazed the Drakthal, who watched from afar. Here were creatures weaker in body but stronger in mind. One morning while exploring a valley, the team found a Drakthal struggling to free itself from a collapsed rock formation. Its massive arms could not shift the stones that had trapped it. Arlen's team rushed forward. Using pulleys, levers, and their combined effort, they lifted the rocks. The Drakthal stepped free, looking at the humans in a way that seemed almost grateful. It was an unspoken acknowledgement. Humans were not a threat. They could be allies. From that moment, contact became more frequent. The Drakthal began approaching cautiously, leaving gifts of polished stones or strange fruits from their forests. The humans responded with small gifts in return, simple items that could not harm, but could be useful. Tools, lights, and small machines. Communication was slow, but it existed. They exchanged gestures, shared food, and observed each other's behavior. Arlane marveled at the lessons this world offered. Strength was not only measured in muscle or armor. Survival on Tharkon required intelligence, careful planning, and sometimes courage to act in unexpected ways. Humans were fragile compared to the Drakthal, but their ingenuity gave them an edge. In quiet moments, he would watch the creatures train their bodies, climbing cliffs and leaping across chasms, and compare it to how his team used machines, maps, and strategies to move safely. It was a dance of different kinds of strength, each valuable in its own way. The human presence also changed the Drakthal. Some of the younger creatures began experimenting with tools they had never used, mimicking human methods to solve problems. One morning, a group of Drakthal helped repair a broken irrigation system in a valley, working together in ways that mirrored human teamwork. It was slow, clumsy at first, but effective. The elders watched with a mix of pride and curiosity, wondering what these small, intelligent creatures could teach them about surviving in a dangerous world. Evenings became a time of shared observation. Humans and Drakthal would sit at safe distances, watching the glowing plants sway in the wind and the distant eruptions of the volcanoes. The humans would draw simple maps in the dirt, pointing out safe paths and sources of food, while the Drakthal responded with gestures indicating their knowledge of the land. Language was not yet possible, but understanding grew. One day, while exploring a canyon, Arlen noticed a strange pattern in the rock, an intricate carving that resembled a map or message. It was the first clear sign of intelligence beyond instinct. The Drakthal had not only survived the planet, they had thrived in their own way, creating structures and symbols that conveyed meaning. The humans realized that their mission was more than exploration. It was the beginning of a relationship, a chance to learn from a species stronger than anything humanity had faced before. As Part 1 drew to a close, the humans had established a fragile but growing trust with the Drakthal. They had survived the first week on a planet designed to kill, not by strength alone, but by working together, being clever, and showing respect. The Drakthal, in turn, had begun to see humans not as weak creatures to ignore or destroy, but as beings capable of adaptation, courage, and perhaps even friendship. Captain Arlen stood once more at the observation deck of their temporary camp, looking at the horizon. The volcanoes glowed in the distance. Rivers of molten rock flowed like liquid fire, and strange, massive trees swayed in the heavy wind. Somewhere out there, the Drakthal moved silently, watching the humans and learning. Somewhere, in the depth of this dangerous world, a bridge was forming between two species, one built not on fear, but on understanding. And for the first time, humanity truly understood that strength was more than muscle. It was imagination, cooperation, and the courage to face the unknown. In the heart of the deadliest planet they had ever known, humans had planted the seeds of a friendship that could change the future of both worlds. The first week had been only the beginning. Tharkon had tested them, but it had also shown them something incredible. Even on a world built for death, humanity could find a way to survive, and perhaps even thrive. The mornings on Tharkon had a strange beauty. The sky glowed with swirling colors, casting long shadows over jagged rocks and glowing plants. Captain Arlen Voss and his team moved carefully through the valley, their boots crunching against the alien soil. Every step was a small victory. Every safe passage through the dangerous terrain reminded them how fragile they were, yet how determined. Humans had survived the first week, but this was only the beginning. The planet had more lessons to teach. The Drakthal had begun to watch the humans more closely. At first, they had stayed hidden, studying from a distance, their eyes glowing faintly in the dim light, but curiosity had taken hold. One of the elders, a massive Drakthal named Tharok, had approached the humans at a safe distance. His presence was intimidating, his body strong and imposing. Yet he made no sudden movements. Arlen felt the weight of his gaze and knew this was an important moment. "We must be careful," Arlen whispered to his team. "This is the first time a full-size Drakthal has approached us without fear. Show respect, but don't make sudden moves." The Drakthal moved slowly, lowering its massive head to the ground, a gesture that seemed to signal trust. Arlen crouched, extending a hand in greeting, and the creature sniffed it. It was tense and long, but then Tharok made a sound, a low hum that the scanners interpreted as a form of communication. The humans had learned to imitate the vibrations, and for a few moments they seemed to speak in silence, exchanging understanding without words. Over the next few days, the humans and Drakthal began to explore together. The humans showed how to navigate tricky paths using ropes and bridges, and the Drakthal demonstrated their incredible strength, moving enormous boulders that blocked the humans' way. Each side learned from the other, and a bond slowly formed. One afternoon, a young Drakthal followed the humans into a narrow canyon. The walls were high and jagged, the floor covered in sharp stones. Arlen noticed that the creature hesitated, its instincts warning it of danger, yet its curiosity pushed it forward. The humans led carefully, pointing out unstable rocks and hidden paths. When the young Drakthal stepped into a small pit, Arlen and his team quickly rigged a simple rope system, lifting it to safety. The Drakthal blinked slowly, a gesture of gratitude that humans began to understand. "What does? It's incredible," said Mira, the team's engineer. "They're learning to trust us, and we're learning to respect them." "This is bigger than exploration. It's a connection." The team set up a small base near the canyon, using lightweight structures and technology that could be easily moved if the terrain became dangerous. From this base, they began observing Drakthal life more closely. They discovered that these creatures had complex social rules, rituals, and a sense of community that went beyond survival. Families moved together, teaching young ones how to climb cliffs, hunt food, and avoid hazards. The humans were fascinated. They had expected to encounter dangerous creatures, but they found intelligence, culture, and even kindness in a species built for strength. One day, the humans observed something remarkable. A Drakthal group was trapped on a cliffside by a sudden rockslide. Their massive bodies could not hold on to the slippery surface. Humans rushed forward with ropes, pulleys, and teamwork. Using careful planning, they helped the creatures climb to safety. For the first time, the Drakthal responded with gestures of acknowledgement rather than fear. The elders watched silently, impressed that these fragile creatures could solve problems in ways even the strongest could not. The humans began documenting everything, not only for science, but for the lessons of survival. They drew maps, noted dangerous areas, and recorded behaviors. In turn, the Drakthal seemed to imitate them, experimenting with simple tools left in safe areas. Small improvements in how the creatures interacted with their environment showed that learning could take place on both sides. One evening, Arlen walked alone along the edge of a cliff, watching the glowing rivers of lava in the distance. He thought about how different humanity was from the Drakthal. Where the creatures relied on power and instinct, humans relied on creativity and planning. It was not weakness. It was a different kind of strength. He realized that this understanding might change everything. The days passed, and trust grew. A pattern developed. Humans explored and mapped. Drakthal observed and learned. Young Drakthal often played near human camps, imitating actions they had seen. Sometimes they clumsily carried small objects, tried simple tools, or even attempted gestures that resembled human signals. The humans laughed quietly at the attempts, careful not to startle them. But they recognized the progress. Captain Voss decided it was time to test communication further. He and his team designed simple visual signs and symbols, pointing to objects and demonstrating their uses. The Drekthal responded, showing understanding by mimicking or pointing to corresponding items. For the first time, it felt like real dialogue was possible without words. The humans were teaching concepts, and the Drekthal were learning and responding. The most significant breakthrough came when the humans encountered an environmental hazard, a sudden acid rainstorm that flooded a shallow valley. Drekthal instincts suggested fleeing blindly, but humans paused to assess the safest route, using simple shelters and coverings. The creatures watched, hesitant at first, then followed cautiously. The humans guided them to safety, showing that survival could be achieved through planning, not just strength. After the storm, the Drekthal began to show subtle changes. They carried tools humans had left behind, explored paths humans suggested, and even shared resources in ways the humans could understand. A young Drekthal, smaller than the rest, brought a glowing fruit to a human child. A simple gesture, but full of meaning. The child smiled, understanding without words. Trust had deepened. Arlene noted in his journal that day, "Strength is more than muscle. It is patience, planning, and understanding. On this planet, we are learning as much from them as they are from us." He knew that the humans' presence was not just an experiment. It was a partnership forming in the heart of the deadliest world they had ever encountered. The bond extended beyond survival. Humans began sharing their stories, simple tales of Earth, of cities, forests, and oceans. Drekthal listened in their way, tilting heads, humming softly, and responding with gestures that suggested curiosity. For the first time, Arlen felt that these creatures saw humans not as fragile intruders, but as companions who could navigate a world even they struggled to master. One morning, while exploring a narrow valley lined with glowing trees, Mira discovered a structure hidden among the rocks. It appeared to be a form of shelter, carved and reinforced by Drekthal hands. Inside, they found evidence of tools, simple machines, and markings that suggested counting or planning. It was proof that intelligence on Tharkin had been thriving long before humans arrived. The humans were humbled. They realized that the planet's inhabitants were not only strong but brilliant in ways that matched the humans' own cleverness. Over the following weeks, the humans and Drekthal began to explore together more openly. Arlen noticed a pattern. The older Drekthal were cautious and proud, watching from a distance, while the younger ones were curious and willing to experiment. The humans adapted to this, learning how to show respect to the elders while guiding the young. It was a delicate balance, but one that strengthened their bond. The greatest lesson came when the humans discovered a natural labyrinth of cliffs and tunnels that could serve as shelter in extreme conditions. They taught the Drekthal how to navigate it safely, using markers, light signals, and simple instructions. At first, the creatures struggled, relying on instinct to find the path. Slowly, they began to understand, following the humans' guidance. By the end of the week, even the elders acknowledged that the humans' approach was effective. As Part 2 came to a close, the humans had learned that Tarkon was not a place to conquer, but a world to understand. The Drekthal, once wary and distant, had begun to engage in a silent partnership. Both species were learning from each other. The humans had gained respect for raw strength and survival instincts, while the Drekthal were beginning to appreciate ingenuity, patience, and cooperation. Captain Arlen stood on the edge of a cliff, watching the sunset turn the sky into waves of purple and gold. Below, the Drekthal moved gracefully through the trees, their massive forms both terrifying and beautiful. He smiled quietly. Humanity had survived, not through power, but through intelligence, understanding, and friendship. And Tharkon, the deadliest world in the galaxy, had given them a gift, the chance to be part of something greater than themselves, a connection that might change both species forever. In the silence of the valley, The humans and Drakthal shared the moment. No words were needed. The bond was clear. Survival was only the beginning. Together, they could explore, learn, and perhaps, one day, thrive in ways neither species could have imagined alone. The mornings on Tharkan had begun to feel less hostile to the humans. They had learned the patterns of the wind, the paths of rivers, and the rhythms of the planet itself. Yet the planet was never truly safe. Every day brought new challenges, new obstacles, and new lessons. Captain Arlen Voss and his team had begun to feel that the humans were no longer mere visitors. They were part of the world, slowly becoming part of its story. One day, a distant tremor shook the valley. The ground vibrated under the humans' boots, and the air filled with a deep, low rumble. Arlen's scanners showed movement in the volcanic region far to the north. A small fissure had opened in the volcano's side, and molten rock was beginning to flow into the river systems below. The humans realized quickly that this was a dangerous event, one that could threaten the Drakthal settlements in the valley. They gathered their equipment and prepared to move.
"Everyone stay calm,"
Arlen said.
"We are not here to fight. We are here to help. We must think."
The team moved with practiced precision, checking their tools, reviewing maps, and preparing communication devices. They would not face this alone. They intended to involve the Drakthal in every decision. When the humans arrived at the edge of the valley, they found the Drakthal gathered near the rivers, their massive bodies tense and uncertain. The elders looked to Arlen, as if asking, "What can you do?" Arlen knelt and drew a simple diagram in the dirt, showing how the molten rock would flow and which areas were safe. Then he demonstrated using small markers and lights where the Drakthal could move their young and elderly to higher ground. At first, the Drakthal hesitated. Their pride was strong, and their instinct was to act alone. But the humans were calm, patient, and persistent. Slowly, the younger Drakthal began to guide their elders along the suggested routes, moving cautiously but steadily. Humans followed, helping clear small debris, pointing out hidden dangers, and offering reassurance. The operation took hours. Humans and Drakthal moved together, a silent but powerful team. Every step required attention and trust. At one point, a small group of young Drakthal hesitated at a steep cliff. Arlen and Mira set up a pulley system, allowing the creatures to climb safely. The Drakthal learned quickly, adapting to the tools in ways that surprised the humans. Strength alone could not solve the problem. Strategy, communication, and coordination were needed, and humans provided that in a way the Drakthal had never seen. As the molten rock advanced, humans and Drakthal continued their careful work. Families were moved to higher ground. Young ones were guided safely across dangerous areas, and the elders observed silently, impressed. For the first time, they realized that these small, fragile beings could perform acts that even the strongest could not accomplish alone. The humans' patience, intelligence, and calm leadership had saved the day. By the time the eruption settled and the lava flows slowed, the valley had been protected. The Drakthal watched the humans with newfound respect. Their expressions were subtle, but Arlen could feel it. The partnership had become something more than survival. It was trust, mutual understanding, and recognition of each other's strengths. After the crisis, humans and Drakthal worked together to repair the valley. The Drakthal used their strength to move heavy boulders, create channels for water, and rebuild shelters. Humans designed tools, marked safe paths, and coordinated the effort. It was the first time the two species had collaborated so closely, each contributing in ways the other could not. The valley transformed from a dangerous, chaotic place into a cooperative landscape of survival and learning. During quiet moments, Arlen observed the Drakthal, teaching each other what they had learned from humans. Young Drakthal were experimenting with small tools, building simple bridges, and following human methods to solve problems. The elders observed with cautious pride, seeing that intelligence could be shared, learned, and respected across species. Mira spent her time documenting the interactions, recording behaviors, and noting the ways the Drakthal adapted to human guidance. She marveled at their quick learning. A species evolved to survive through strength alone could now combine that power with planning, observation, and cooperation. It was a rare and beautiful sight, a blending of instincts and intellect. One evening, as the sun set over the glowing rivers, a young Drakthal approached Arlen and extended a small carved stone. It was a simple gift, rough but carefully shaped. Arlen smiled and accepted it, showing the creature a human gesture of thanks. For a long moment, they simply watched each other. No words were necessary. The stone symbolized more than friendship. It represented respect, trust, and the possibility of a shared future. In the days that followed, the humans and Drakthal explored further, venturing into areas previously considered too dangerous. They climbed cliffs, crossed rivers, and navigated dense forests filled with sharp plants and strange creatures. Each new challenge strengthened their partnership. The Drakthal had learned that humans' methods worked, and humans had learned that raw strength alone could not always overcome the planet's obstacles. Together, they were stronger. One morning, a distant sound echoed across the valley, a low hum that humans had learned meant attention or alert. Arlen recognized it immediately. The Drakthal were calling the humans to see something important. They followed cautiously and found a large structure partially hidden by rocks. It was a complex arrangement of stone and vines, clearly designed as a storage area or community center. Humans marveled at the craftsmanship, while the Drakthal gestured proudly, as if showing their achievement. Arlen knelt and studied the markings on the walls. They appeared to be maps, diagrams, and notes, an early form of record-keeping. The humans realized that the Drakthal culture had always been more than brute strength. They had planned, recorded, and organized in ways that even humans could admire. The discovery deepened the bond between species. Humans had entered a world built for death, and instead of conquering, they were learning, respecting, and growing together. As the days passed, both species grew more comfortable in each other's presence. Humans learned to predict environmental hazards through Drakthal intuition, while the Drakthal learned to use tools and methods that made survival easier. Even small successes, like constructing temporary bridges or moving supplies, became celebrations of teamwork. Laughter, soft humming, and gestures of appreciation echoed through the valley. Captain Arlen realized that this partnership could be the key to future exploration. If humans could build trust with the strongest species on one of the deadliest planets in the galaxy, there was hope for cooperation and understanding elsewhere. The lessons of Tharkon were profound. Respect, patience, intelligence, and empathy were as powerful as strength, and sometimes even stronger. One afternoon, while exploring a narrow canyon, the team discovered a group of Drakthal children experimenting with human tools. They tried lifting rocks, building small shelters, and following simple diagrams drawn in the dirt. Mira laughed softly. "Look at them," she said. "They're learning so fast. They might even teach us something new one day."
Arlen nodded, feeling the truth of her words.
Knowledge could flow in both directions, and the world was richer for it. Evenings became a time of reflection. Humans and Drakthal would gather at safe distances, observing the glowing forests and molten rivers, sharing silent moments of understanding. No words were needed. Each species had learned to communicate through gestures, patterns, and shared experience. It was a partnership built on trust, strengthened by challenges, and grounded in mutual respect. The most important lesson of all came when a storm hit the valley. The winds were strong, carrying sharp particles and dangerous debris. Humans and Drakthal worked side by side, reinforcing shelters and guiding the young to safe areas. The operation was quiet and calm, relying on careful planning, observation, and cooperation rather than force. When the storm passed, both species had survived unharmed, and the bond between them had grown even stronger. Captain Arlen stood on a cliff, watching the valley below. The Drakthal moved gracefully among the trees. the young experimenting with new methods, learned from humans. The humans were busy documenting, repairing, and improving their base. It was a scene of harmony, a rare moment of peace on a world built for struggle. Arlen felt pride, not in conquest, but in partnership. Humanity had survived not by power, but by intelligence, patience, and respect. And the Drakthal had learned that strength was most effective when combined with cooperation. As Part 3 drew to a close, the humans and Drakthal had faced their first true challenge together, a natural disaster that tested their skills, patience, and trust. Both species had learned from each other. Humans had taught strategy, observation, and planning. Drakthal had shared strength, instinct, and resilience. Together, they had accomplished something neither could do alone. Arlen looked toward the horizon, where distant volcanoes glowed softly in the evening light. He knew that the next challenge would come, as it always did on Tharkon. But he also knew that humans were no longer alone. They had allies, teachers, and friends in the strongest species the galaxy had ever known. Together, they would continue to explore, learn, and survive. In the quiet of the valley, humans and Drakthal shared the moment. No words were needed. The bond was clear. Survival was only the beginning. Cooperation and understanding had become a new kind of strength, one that could shape the future of both species in ways neither had imagined. The mornings on Tharkon felt different now. The humans and Drakthal had lived together for weeks, learning each other's ways, adapting to the planet, and discovering strengths that neither species had expected. The valley, once dangerous and unforgiving, had become a place of cooperation, where knowledge and instinct worked together. Captain Arlen Voss stood on a ridge overlooking the settlement. The glowing plants swayed gently, rivers of molten rock shimmered in the distance, and the Drakthal moved gracefully among the trees and cliffs. It was a scene of quiet harmony, a rare moment of peace on a world built for survival. Arlane turned to Mira and the rest of the team.
"We've come far," he said. "But today is the day we take the next step."
It's time to show the Drakthal that humans can be partners, not just visitors. The team nodded, understanding the importance of the moment. It was more than survival now. It was about trust, respect, and the possibility of a lasting alliance. The humans began by sharing new tools they had designed for the environment. Simple machines that could lift heavy objects, rope systems for crossing dangerous chasms, and light devices that could signal others across the valley. They demonstrated each tool carefully, showing how it could help the Drakthal without taking away their strength or independence. The young Drakthal watched closely, mimicking gestures and attempting to use the machines themselves. Laughter and low humming sounds filled the air as the lessons continued. Tharok, the elder Drakthal, observed silently. His massive body seemed relaxed, but his eyes were sharp and calculating. He had seen many things during his long life, and nothing had impressed him more than the human's intelligence and patience. Slowly, he stepped forward, lowering his head in a gesture of acknowledgement. It was the first time the humans had seen such a display from him, a clear sign of respect and acceptance. Arlen smiled, understanding that this simple act meant more than any words could convey.
A day passed with joint exploration.
Humans and Drakthal moved together through the forests, across cliffs, and over rivers. Each species contributed its unique abilities. Humans mapped the terrain, planned safe routes, and solved problems creatively. The Drakthal used their strength, agility, and instinct to navigate difficult areas and guide their companions. Young Drakthal began to experiment with human techniques, building small bridges, arranging markers, and using tools to solve simple challenges. It was learning in both directions, and each success strengthened the bond. By evening, the group reached a plateau overlooking the valley. The sun was low, casting golden and purple light over the land. Humans and Drakthal rested together, quietly observing the landscape. It was a moment of reflection. Arlen knew that this partnership had changed everything. Humanity had survived a Deathworld, not through raw power, but through intelligence, cooperation, and empathy. The Drakthal had seen the value of these qualities and had begun to integrate them into their own way of life. Mira walked over to Arlen, holding a small device. "Captain, look at this," she said. "The young Drakthal have started drawing maps of the valley. They're combining our markings with their own knowledge. They're planning." Arlen bent down to examine the maps, tracing the lines with his finger. Paths, safe areas, and landmarks were marked, a blend of human logic and Drakthal instinct. It was a remarkable achievement. "Planning," Arlen said softly. "They've never done this before. We've taught them, but they've made it their own. This is what makes a true partnership, learning, adapting, and growing together." The night fell, but the valley remained alive with soft light. Humans and Drakthal set up a shared camp, placing their shelters near each other, but leaving enough space for comfort. Fires were not needed. Soft lamps illuminated the area without frightening the Drakthal. Around them, the younger creatures played with simple machines, experimenting, laughing, or at least making the low humming sounds that humans had learned were their version of amusement. Arlen took a moment to speak to the elders. "We want to continue learning from each other," he said. "We want to share knowledge, explore together, and face challenges together. Tharkon is dangerous, yes, but it has given us a gift. The chance to work with a species stronger than anything we faced, yet willing to learn." Tharok lowered his head slightly, a gesture of agreement. The humans understood that this was more than survival. It was recognition. Humanity, once seen as weak, had earned respect from one of the galaxy's strongest species. Over the next several days, humans and Drakthal worked on joint projects. They reinforced shelters to withstand storms, built observation towers to monitor the volcanoes, and created pathways through dangerous forests. The Drakthal learned to use human tools more effectively, while humans gained a deeper understanding of instinct and endurance. Each day, the two species grew closer, not only as allies, but as companions. One morning, Arlen and Mira climbed to a high cliff to observe the valley. From this vantage point, they could see the full extent of the settlement. Drakthal moved confidently along paths humans had marked, young ones experimenting with tools, and elders guiding them with pride. The humans smiled, realizing that their presence had helped create a balance. Strength and intelligence, instinct and planning, tradition and innovation, all working together in harmony. "Captain," Mira said, pointing to the horizon. "Look, the young Drakthal are drawing symbols in the dirt, pointing to areas of interest and sharing them with the others. They're teaching each other now."
"We've sparked something bigger than ourselves."
Arlen nodded.
"This is just the beginning. If we can learn from them, and they can learn from us, imagine what we could accomplish together, here and beyond this world."
The days passed, and both species continued to thrive. The humans documented their observations, sharing lessons on engineering, navigation, and communication.
The Drakthal taught survival in extreme conditions, reading the terrain, predicting storms, and moving with skill and confidence. Each interaction reinforced trust and friendship, and small rituals developed. The two species exchanged simple gifts, gestures of thanks, and moments of shared curiosity. One afternoon, a sudden rainstorm swept through the valley. Unlike the previous storms, this one was mild, but still dangerous for those unprepared. Humans and Drakthal worked together to protect young ones and reinforce shelters. The operation was calm and organized, relying on cooperation rather than force. When the storm passed, both species had learned and grown from the experience. They had faced another challenge and emerged stronger, not because of power, but because of partnership. At night, the valley glowed softly with lamps, firelight, and bioluminescent plants. Humans and Drakthal sat together quietly, sharing stories and gestures. Arlen thought about the journey so far, from the first cautious encounters to this shared understanding. Humanity had survived the deadliest world in the galaxy not through conquest, but through respect, intelligence, and friendship. The Drakthal had come to understand that strength was not just physical, and humans had learned that even the cleverest minds could be strengthened by instinct and endurance. The final step came when Arlen called a meeting of both species at the largest plateau in the valley. Humans and Drakthal gathered together, side by side. Arlen spoke slowly, his words clear and deliberate. "We have faced this world together, learned from each other, and grown stronger. We are different, but we are equals. Today we begin a new journey, not as strangers or enemies, but as partners. Together we can explore, learn, and thrive." Darak, the elder, stepped forward. He lowered his massive head in acknowledgement, and the younger Drakthal followed suit, a gesture of acceptance and agreement. Humans responded with their own signs, raising hands, offering gifts, and smiling. It was a historic moment. On a planet designed for death, two species had come together, not through force, but through respect, intelligence, and understanding. Over the following weeks, humans and Drakthal formalized their partnership. Simple systems were created to share knowledge, coordinate exploration, and solve problems together. The valley became a hub of learning, cooperation, and innovation. Children of both species played nearby, observing and learning from each other. Elders of the Drakthal taught survival skills, while humans taught tools, mapping, and planning. Together they were shaping a future neither could achieve alone. Arlen often reflected on the journey. Humanity had faced a world built for death, and not only survived, but formed a bond with the strongest species they had ever encountered. The Drakthal had taught them endurance, observation, and instinct. Humanity had taught the Drakthal planning, patience, and cooperation. Both species had grown stronger, wiser, and more understanding. The story of Part 4 ended with a quiet moment at sunset. Humans and Drakthal stood together on a ridge, looking at the glowing rivers, jagged cliffs, and dense forests. The sky was a swirl of colors, as if celebrating the harmony below. No words were spoken. It was enough to feel the trust, the respect, and the shared knowledge between them. A bond had been forged that would last generations. Captain Arlen Voss looked out at the horizon, a small smile on his face. Humanity had met the strongest Deathworld species and proved that strength was not only in muscle, but in courage, intelligence, and friendship. Together, humans and Drakthal would explore the galaxy, face challenges, and thrive. Tharkon, the planet of danger, had become a symbol of hope. And for the first time, humans truly understood what it meant to be strong. Not just surviving, but building, learning, and connecting with others in a universe full of wonders. It was about partnership, respect, and the limitless possibilities that awaited when two species worked together. In the quiet of the valley, under the glowing sky, the humans and Drakthal shared a single truth. Together they were stronger than any world could ever be.